Carter and his partner, away from the noise and crowd of the city, were dreaming of a new beginning. When they saw the ad, they both paused at the same time. The photos were old, the paint on the window frames was peeling, but it had a certain quiet charm. This house offered them a chance to breathe after the concrete jungles of the big city. It would be their little paradise, a sanctuary where they could escape their problems and build a simple but happy life. This was exactly what they were looking for, a sense of home. The house stood forgotten, swallowed by greenery. Its exterior was worn out, and the weeds in the garden were as tall as them. However, the potential inside the house overshadowed all these negatives at first glance. The walls were faded, but light streamed in from everywhere. There was a fresh, airy atmosphere, not a stuffy one. The young couple was excited by the idea of turning this place into a paradise with their own hands. They would paint the walls, renovate the old kitchen cabinets, and polish the peeling floor. They were dreaming of collecting new memories and building a new life in every room. At that moment, neither Carter nor his partner could realize how rotten the foundation of these dreams actually was. They didn't know that this excitement was actually the silence before an approaching storm. The landlord, Mr. Kimbrough, was an old, grumpy, but initially trustworthy-looking man. He greeted Carter and his partner at the door with a warm smile. As they shook hands, Mr. Kimbrough's palms were sweaty. The young couple had attributed this to the old man's excitement. As he showed them around, he enthusiastically described every corner, talking about the house's history and its former tenants. His storytelling was not the official language of a real estate agent, but rather like a grandfather telling a story to his grandchildren. This sincerity, which resonated with the young couple, quickly swept away all the doubts in their minds. Mr. Kimbrough said there were small repairs to be done in the house, but he would take care of all of them as soon as possible. "I promise you," he said, "you look like good people, so I will do everything I can for you." These words were enough to win the young couple's hearts. They believed they had found a home and, moreover, had agreed with a good person. However, a voice in them whispered that there was something strange beneath this excessive sincerity and promises. However, when it came to the paperwork, this sincerity strangely disappeared. Mr. Kimbrough avoided making a lease agreement. "What do we need a contract for?" "We trust each other," he said. "You make your payments to me, and I'll give you a peaceful home." Carter hesitated. It was the first time in his life he had encountered such a situation. Moving into a house with a handshake deal and no formal agreement with the landlord was not a very professional situation. His partner also shared the same concerns, but they couldn't voice them against the charm of the house and Mr. Kimbrough's convincing demeanor. Maybe he's right, Carter had thought. Maybe he really wants a relationship based on trust. This thought was a lie they had made up to reassure themselves. Deep down, they felt that something was wrong from the start. When talking about the rent, Mr. Kimbrough had said, "The rent is $525. And there's a deposit. When you look inside the house, you can see how neglected it is, can't you? I'll need to spend some money to fix it up. That's why I'm asking for a little more money as a deposit. Give me $1,000 and everything will be guaranteed. If you leave the house clean and tidy, I'll return your money down to the last penny." The young couple was surprised. $1,000 had seemed high to them. However, the dream of the house and Mr. Kimbrough's promise to fix up your house were enough to convince them. This high deposit created the impression that the house would indeed be maintained. Moreover, Mr. Kimbrough had said that he would spend all the Vaz money on the house, and therefore formalities like a contract would spoil this sincere relationship. "Give me cash so we don't have to deal with bank transactions," he had said. At this point, Carter's partner noticed the tense, suspicious expression on Mr. Kimbrough's face. An alarm bell rang in the young man's head. Cash, no contract. This bore all the signs of a scam. He thought he understood why Mr. Kimbrough's palms were sweaty. It was sweat not from excitement, but from guilt. But Carter tried to convince his partner. "Maybe the old man isn't good with banking transactions. Why are you so suspicious?" His partner just shook his head. "I don't know, I just don't feel right." But the charm of the house was enough to suppress their doubts. A few days later, with the cash they had barely managed to find, they showed up at his door. Mr. Kimbrough counted the money and put it in his wallet. He didn't give them a receipt or make them sign a document. He just said, "Good deal," and handed them the key. At that moment, the thought, "he took the 1,000 so easily," crossed Carter's mind. For the first few months, everything seemed to be going well. Carter had moved into the house in May 2016, and his partner had joined him in August. Small problems began to appear in the house. A leaky faucet, a non-working outlet, a peeling out tile. Every time they called Mr. Kimbrough, he would say, "I'll handle it. I'll come and check it out as soon as possible." But he never came. Months passed and the problems grew. The young couple had to solve the problems by spending their own money. Every day, their trust in Mr. Kimbrough was shaken. That sincere, fatherly landlord figure had given way to an indifferent, untrustworthy character. A year later, in May 2017, they decided they could no longer endure this disappointment. They were going to move out. They called Mr. Kimbrough 2 weeks in advance. When he answered the phone, his voice was cheerful again, as if nothing had happened. "Ah, children, I missed you," he said. "Is everything okay?" Carter immediately brought up the deposit. "Mr. Kimbrough, as you know, we're moving out. When can we get our $1,000 deposit back?" There was a silence on the other end. This was the longest silence he had ever heard. Then Mr. Kimbrough's voice took on a cold, indifferent, and harsh tone. "What deposit?" he asked. "I didn't take a deposit from you." Carter's world fell apart. "What do you mean you didn't take a deposit? We gave you 1,000 in cash by hand." Mr. Kimbrough laughed, a cruel, mocking laugh. "You misunderstood," he said. "I didn't take that money as a deposit. That money was for the repairs of the house. You don't have a lease. You don't have a receipt. How will you prove it?" The young couple, in shock and anger, didn't know what to do. This meant that all the dreams and trust they had built over a year were shattered in a few seconds. And now, in the courtroom, the whole story was being told in a few sentences, in one breath. The judge, looking at Mr. Kimbrough, asked, "How much rent were you getting from this house you rented?" Mr. Kimbrough, with a relaxed demeanor, replied, $525. The judge's next question made the young couple's hearts beat faster. "Well, did you take a deposit?" Mr. Kimbrough, with that mocking smile on his face, said, "No. I didn't take any deposit from him. In fact, he was supposed to give me $125. When the judge asked Mr. Kimbrough about this claim, Carter's stomach tightened. In the dim lights of the courtroom, he saw that fake, relaxed expression on Mr. Kimbrough's face. The judge's voice echoed, "Is that correct, Mr. Kimbrough? Did you take $1,000 security deposit?" Mr. Kimbrough, tilting his head slightly to the side as if this situation was very funny, said, "That is not correct. He gave me no security deposit." Breaking the silence in the courtroom, the judge asked, "Well, Mr. Carter, show me proof that you gave Mr. Kimbrough a $1,000 security deposit." Carter looked at his partner. His partner had lowered his eyes to the floor. They were both thinking the same thing. That moment, their foolish trust, that sentence, "no need for a contract," had turned their lives upside down. Carter's voice trembled. "I don't have it." But this was only the beginning of the story. Days after that shocking conversation about the deposit, Carter and his partner were hopelessly wandering the empty and silent rooms of the house. As they looked at the walls, the peeling paint, and the unrepaired windows, a single thought ran through their minds. How did we trust him? Their trust had collapsed on them like the roof of the beautiful house they had once dreamed of. Every unrepaired faucet, every cracked tile, was like a tangible proof of Mr. Kimbrough's lies and the trap he had set for them. His partner, holding a roll of duct tape, was trying to fix the edge of the kitchen cabinets and turned to Carter with a bitter smile, saying, "At least we can fix some things." But they both knew that the real thing that needed fixing was this fiasco that Mr. Kimbrough had put them through. It was in this state of mind that the phone rang. The caller was Mr. Kimbrough. Carter hesitantly answered the phone to them. His heart was pounding in his chest. "Hello, children," Mr. Kimbrough said in a cheerful voice, as if nothing had happened between them. His voice was warm, reassuring, but at the same time it was now fake and repulsive to the young couple. "I have great news for you." "What news?" Carter asked, trying to hide the coldness in his voice. "It's about your house. The renovation budget I was waiting for has finally been approved. I can start the repairs now. I'm going to renew the ceiling, the floor, everything. The house will be spotless. Mr. Kimbrough was talking with an excitement that he himself didn't believe. Carter and his partner looked at each other in surprise. How could this man come up with such an offer just a few days after denying their $1,000 deposit? His partner, narrowing his eyes, whispered, "How long will it take?" Carter relayed the question to Mr. Kimbrough. "Oh, about 2 weeks, maybe 3. Workers are slow," said Mr. Kimbrough, chuckling. "But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you on the street during this time. I have another property, a clean, spotless apartment. You can stay there while the renovation is being done. Since you are good people, I won't even charge you any extra rent. When the renovation is finished, you can move back into your house. What do you say?" This offer was both unbelievable and incredibly tempting. On one hand, there was the inner voice questioning whether they could trust him. On the other hand, there was the hope of returning to the house that belonged to them, but which they could never truly possess. The mistrust and anger they felt toward Mr. Kimbrough were pushed to the back of their minds for a moment by this show of goodwill. Maybe he's right, Carter thought. Maybe he's really trying to be a good person, or, or his conscience is bothering him. His partner's inner voice was more cautious. "We should stay away from this man. First he took our deposit, and now he's trying to send us to another house. There's something fishy about this." But the disappointment and hopelessness they felt about the house they were living in caused his partner to get involved in this dangerous game as well. After all, they would at least be living in a better house for a while. The rent would remain the same. Maybe this was an opportunity for everything to get back on track. They both clung to this thought. The next day, Mr. Kimbrough took them to the new house. This was a more modern and well-maintained apartment compared to their old house. The walls were freshly painted, and the floors were shiny. Everything was as Mr. Kimbrough had promised it would be after the renovation. As he looked out the apartment window, Carter whispered, "Maybe everything will be all right. Maybe it was just a bad start." Mr. Kimbrough, while showing them the apartment, had reverted to his fatherly, sweet-talker persona. "Isn't this a great place? You see how well I'm treating you," he said. The young couple's suspicion weakened in the face of the new house's glow and the brightness of Mr. Kimbrough's words. They even felt guilty for being unfair to this man. They didn't know that Mr. Kimbrough didn't even have the authority to rent this apartment. This apartment was like a theater stage, and Mr. Kimbrough was skillfully playing a role on it. They still didn't know what was behind the curtain. Moving day was the first day of May. As they carried their old, run-down belongings into this new, spotless apartment, they felt a strange unease. It was as if they were staying as guests and could be told to leave now at any moment. It was unclear how long they would stay in this house. Just like from the beginning, there were no documents, no contract. Everything depended on Mr. Kimbrough's word. He had said 2 weeks. Neither Carter nor his partner could guess what would happen at the end of this period. If they lost this house too, what would they have left? Neither a home nor their $1,000. The first week, everything was great. The apartment was much more comfortable than their old house. The windows didn't leak, the outlets worked, and most importantly, everything offered them a chance for a new beginning. However, they lived every day thinking that a phone call from Mr. Kimbrough would be the herald of everything changing in an instant. Even while watching television in the evenings, they would flinch when the doorbell rang. The thought, "What happened?" constantly occupied their minds. As the second week was about to end, there was no word from Mr. Kimbrough. No information about the renovation, and no news about when they would return to their own house. Carter's partner had asked, "Don't you think it's strange? The renovation should have been finished. Why isn't he calling?" Carter replied, "I don't know. Maybe things got delayed. He probably doesn't want to bother us." But they both knew that this explanation was far from the truth. This silence was like the calm before a storm. In the beginning of the third week, Carter and his partner had settled into a new routine. They had even started to forget the existence of their old house. They had gotten used to their new life. But this familiarity was an illusion, a fragile illusion that would pop with the slightest touch, like a bubble. And that day, that ill-fated day, came. It was May 11th. The weather was sunny, the birds were chirping, everything was normal. Until the door knocked. The young couple's hearts suddenly felt like they were going to leap out of their chests. When they opened the door, they were faced with two police officers in uniform and a frustrated young woman standing next to them. The woman started yelling, waving the papers in her hand. "Get out of this house now! This is my house! What are you doing here?" Carter and his partner looked at each other in shock. One of the police officers, in a calm but authoritarian voice, said to them, "You need to leave immediately. This is the legal owner of the house." But, but Mr. Kimbrough told us this was his house and we could stay for 2 weeks, said Carter, his voice trembling. The woman let out a mocking laugh. "Who is Mr. Kimbrough? How did you get into my house? No, this house is mine and you have no right to be here." The young couple's all hopes, dreams, and trust were once again shattered, this time more harshly. The landlord's renovation excuse was actually just a method he used to scam them. They had become part of this lie. They had stayed for more than 3 weeks thinking it was just 2, and now they had learned that the real owner of the lie was at the door. But what they didn't know was that the real owner was at the door. When the door knocked, on that beautiful 11th of May, Carter and his partner were having a cheerful afternoon. Inside the sun-drenched room, they had started to get used to their new home and were making small plans for the future. However, the scene they were faced with when they opened the door came down on this happy moment like a nightmare. On the doorstep, there was a young woman standing next to two police officers in uniform. The expression on the woman's face resembled the surface of a cold, sharp knife, a sharp mixture of anger and astonishment. The stack of papers she was waving in her hand whispered that this was not a simple knock on the door, but the beginning of a storm. "Who are you?" the woman yelled, her voice trembling but determined. "What are you doing in my house?" Carter looked at the police, then at his partner in shock. "Excuse me, there must be a misunderstanding. We rented this place from Mr. Kimbrough." The woman got even more angry when she heard this name. Her face turned purple. "Who is Mr. Kimbrough? How did you get into my house? No, this house is mine, and you have no right to be here. This is squatting." One of the police officers, in a calm but authoritarian voice, said, "The lady is right. You need to leave immediately. She is the legal owner of this house." Carter's world collapsed once again. In that moment, he realized how big a lie Mr. Kimbrough's bright words, fake smiles, and fatherly attitude had been for over a month. They were faced with the biggest deception of their lives. And this deception had not only taken their $1,000 deposit, but also all their peace and future. This house, which had once been a dream, had now turned into a nightmare. But this isn't possible," said Carter, his voice trembling. "We knew this was Mr. Kimbrough's property. He told us we could stay here for a renovation." The woman shrugged her shoulders. "Renovation? What renovation? There is no renovation being done in my house. You are squatters living in one of Mr. Kimbrough's properties." This sentence hit them like a slap. The word squatter trampled on all their feelings of honor and honesty. They were both crushed by the weight of this word. They felt naive, stupid, and deceived. "Wait a minute," said Carter. "Who is Mr. Kimbrough then? How did he get access to this house?" The woman introduced herself as Jenny. "I am the legal owner of this house, and Mr. Kimbrough, he was just the resident assistant for my houses. That is, he was the person who found tenants for one of my properties and solved the tenants' problems." This explanation made things click for Carter. Mr. Kimbrough was not the landlord, just an employee, an assistant. By pretending to be an honest, well-intentioned one, he had actually lied to them, placed them in a house that didn't belong to them, and taken their deposit. This was like the shocking confession on the last page of a crime novel. The police officer's statement that Mr. Kimbrough had 10 properties showed how big and organized this scam actually was. "Then how did he have access to this house?" Carter asked, his voice now full of anger. "Did he have the keys?" Jenny said, "Yes. He would have the keys to the properties that belong to me. There is also a lockbox. The keys would be in there. This house was also vacant to be rented out to someone else, but he put you in." Jenny continued, unable to control the anger on her face. "You stayed in my house without permission. Without my knowledge, the owner. Kimbrough scammed you. I don't know what money he took from you, but you need to get out of here as soon as possible. This conversation was like waking up in the middle of a nightmare for Carter and his partner. With the police officers' firm but gentle warnings, they started packing their belongings, not knowing what to do. Their hands were trembling as they hurriedly stuffed everything into suitcases in the bedroom and boxes in the kitchen. They felt humiliated, helpless, and completely alone. As they packed their belongings, the joy and future dreams of that day turned into dusty and broken memories. They had realized that the 3 weeks they had spent in this house were a fake dream. Every smile, every moment, was part of a game orchestrated by Mr. Kimbrough. The move took less than an hour. When they had packed their belongings and gone outside, the police and Jenny, who were waiting at the door, were looking at them like they were strangers. Outside, left alone with their belongings, they didn't know where to go. They had only one address, a hotel. They headed towards the nearest, most affordable hotel. Inside the car, they sat in silence among their belongings. They had nothing to say. The only thing they felt was a deep sense of shame and helplessness. When they parked the car in a hotel parking lot, they both turned to each other. "So what happens now?" his partner asked. Carter shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know." The hotel was far from making them feel at home. A strange smell, hard beds, a stuffy room. They couldn't sleep that night. In the morning, they thought about the hotel bill. Their cash was running out. Their bank accounts were already weak due to the financial difficulties of the past months. Now a hotel bill was added to that. Every day, Mr. Kimbrough's scam was affecting their lives more deeply. The days at the hotel turned into a nightmare. They spent their days looking for a new house, browsing real estate websites, and talking to real estate agents on the phone. Every phone call brought them more disappointment. No one wanted to rent them a house. First, they were homeless. Second, the discovery of Mr. Kimbrough's scam had damaged the trust they were given. Now, every real estate agent was approaching them with suspicion. They were seen not as victims of a scam, but as part of the scam. A week later, when they looked at their bank accounts, they were both shocked. Their accounts had gone into the negatives. The hotel bills, food expenses, and small expenses from their new house search had drained all their savings. They could no longer stay in a hotel. Finally, they came to a decision. "We can't go on like this," said Carter. "What this man did shouldn't go unpunished." His partner nodded in agreement. "You're right. We thought we had no proof, but maybe we do. The hotel bills show the situation we got into because of Kimbrough. That counts as proof." At that moment, they were looking at the hotel receipts, their lost 1,000 and their helplessness. These receipts were not just pieces of paper, but also tangible proof of the injustice they had experienced and the pain Mr. Kimbrough had caused them. They decided they would take legal action. And this was the first step of a showdown that would be taken to court. The cold, gray atmosphere of the courtroom was in stark contrast with the material and emotional devastation that Carter and his partner were in. The judge's questions, which came after Jenny's statement, had turned into an interrogation that questioned the young couple's own decisions rather than Mr. Kimbrough's deceit. The judge, scanning both sides of the courtroom with her eyes, spoke in an icy tone. "And you didn't pay the June rent." Carter swallowed. He paused for a moment to explain himself, but the words got stuck in his throat under the judge's impatient gaze. His partner, in his place, looked at the judge and answered in a trembling voice, "No, ma'am, we didn't pay in June." The judge's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Well, did you pay May's rent?" she asked. In the question, there was a certainty that suggested a confession, not just an answer. At that moment, they realized that the judge would investigate this issue in depth, and a simple yes or no would not be enough. They had been put in a difficult situation because of Mr. Kimbrough's lies. But in the judge's eyes, they were also people who had lied, not paid their rent, and broken the law. Carter, without giving his partner a chance to answer, said, "No, ma'am." His voice was almost a whisper. "We didn't pay in May either." The judge lightly tapped the pen in her hand on the table, making the echo of this action the only sound in the courtroom. Her gaze shifted to Mr. Kimbrough, then returned to the young couple. "So," she said, her voice had hardened, "you didn't pay May's rent either." This was not a question, but a statement. The judge was focusing on the concrete facts in her hand rather than dwelling on Mr. Kimbrough's lies. In her 25 years of career, she had encountered countless cases of lies and scams. She knew that the best scams are built on the victim's own mistakes. The fact that the young couple had given Mr. Kimbrough $1,000 without proof was, in her eyes, an indication of their inexperience and naivety rather than their innocence. The judge adjusted the edge of her glasses with her fingertips and continued quickly. "So you lived in this other person's house until May 11th? "Yes, ma'am." "And you hadn't paid rent for those 11 days? "No, ma'am," said Carter's partner. The trembling in his voice was now obvious. The feeling of shame and being wronged was squeezing him like a vice. They had done this on Mr. Kimbrough's promise. He had said, "You'll come back when the house renovation is finished." This was like an agreement. But now this agreement had turned into a fake document in front of the judge. They had no proof. The only thing they had was a scammer's words. The judge paused for a moment and waited for the tense silence in the courtroom to deepen. The slight, mocking smile on Mr. Kimbrough's face was burning the young couple's insides even more. It seemed Mr. Kimbrough was enjoying the couple's predicament. Their helplessness was his victory. The judge turned back to the young couple. "And you didn't pay rent in June either?" "No, ma'am, we didn't." The expression on the judge's face showed that her patience was now at an end. Her facial features had hardened. "And you have no proof that you gave him $1,000 security deposit." This sentence was like a blow. The deposit issue was the foundation of this case. This money was a symbol of their trust in Mr. Kimbrough and their hopes for the future. And now the judge had revealed this fact with a ruthless certainty, like a bullet finding its target. "No, ma'am," said Carter. His voice was no longer a whisper. "Not anymore." This was more of a defeat than a confession. The judge took off her glasses and placed them on the table and clasped her hands together. Her gaze was scanning the young couple's insides like an X-ray machine. "Okay," she said. Her voice now sounded more like a disappointed teacher than a judge. "So what would you like me to do for you?" This question made Carter's partner feel like he was given a chance. He wanted to seize this chance. "Ma'am," he said, his voice had risen with excitement. "He told us to take the rent money for that month and move out for 2 weeks because he was going to renovate the place." He said these sentences with hope, as if they were presenting brand new evidence to the judge. This was actually a statement that revealed the basis of Mr. Kimbrough's lies. This was the proof of their innocence. This was the only thing that would justify them. However, the judge furrowed her brows even more. She waved her hand in the air, cutting him off. "So what? So he lied." This simple sentence revealed how differently the judge saw the whole situation. For them, this was a deception, a betrayal. For the judge, it was just the story of a man who lied. The judge's logic was completely closed to their emotional turmoil. She was speaking with the harsh, cold rules of the law. "So what's your damage?" the judge asked. This question asked them what their pain, losses, and disappointments meant in a legal language. "The damages are, Your Honor," said Carter's partner, in a trembling voice, "we are seeking punitive damages." The judge smiled slightly at the use of this term. This was not a mocking smile, but rather like a wise person smiling at a naive student. She was smiling at the wrong use of legal terms. Punitive damages were not appropriate for this type of case. This was proof of how far the young couple was from the law. The judge was trying to explain to them that this was not a revenge case, but a compensation case. The judge leaned back, shook her head slightly, and looked at Mr. Kimbrough. "Well, what does Mr. Kimbrough have to say against these claims?" she asked. Her voice was now completely impatient. Mr. Kimbrough relaxed in his chair. His smile became even more pronounced. But the course of the case was about to change with the claims of the other side. In the courtroom, the judge's question, "Well, what does Mr. Kimbrough have to say against these claims?" created a momentary silence. That silence was a moment of victory for Mr. Kimbrough and a moment where the nightmare deepened for the young couple. Mr. Kimbrough leaned back comfortably in his chair. His mocking smile had become even more pronounced. When the judge noticed that both parties were looking at her, she brought her fingers together, signaling that the next move would come from her. Carter's partner perceived this action by the judge as a glimmer of hope and gathered all his courage to speak. "Ma'am," he said, his voice trembling, "in the process of all of this, I lost my job. I was unable to get to work. I had to resign my work because I needed to find another place to stay. I overdrafted my bank account because I didn't immediately have available funds to rent a motel for $300. I did have $500. The expression on the judge's face did not change with his words. She knew that these statements were not relevant to the case. This was a life's drama, not a legal case. Unfortunately, the law evaluates evidence, not emotions. The judge gently raised her hand in the air, cutting him off, and said in a firm voice, "He's not paying you money." His partner continued as if he hadn't heard the judge's words. "That I was making payments monthly for him." The judge, this time more harshly, interrupted him. "Listen to me." A moment of tension was created in the courtroom. Carter squeezed his partner's hand. He knew that the judge's patience was running out. The judge was looking at Mr. Kimbrough, but her words were for the young couple. "He's not paying you money. He's not paying you for losing your job. He's not paying you because you were inconvenienced." This was the harsh reality of the law. The judge was giving the young couple a lesson. This case is not about your drama, but about Mr. Kimbrough's obligation to return your deposit. His partner, faced with this harsh reality, bowed his head in helplessness. But there was one more glimmer of hope. "But he was supposed to give us a 30-day notice. That woman came on Friday and—" The judge's voice this time struck like lightning. "Do you have a lease?" she asked. In the question, she was not looking for an answer, but for the absence of a lie. The judge was once again returning to the main issue. This was the main pillar of the case. If there was no contract, there was no legal obligation for a 30-day notice. In the judge's eyes, everything was that simple. The judge's scale of justice was measuring the weight of the evidence, not Mr. Kimbrough's conscience. "No," said his partner. His voice was completely hopeless. "But—" The judge cut him off once again. "Listen to me," she yelled. "Do you have a lease?" "No, ma'am, not anymore." This was like a repetition of the "I don't have proof" sentence from the previous part. This time, the judge didn't even bother to question the reality of this answer. Everything was now very clear. "You never had a lease with him," said the judge. Her voice was definite and firm. "No, ma'am," said Carter's partner. "He didn't bring it. He said he would. He never did." The judge nodded her head. This was the end of this part of the case for her. "Okay, so we have nothing. You have no legal basis." This sentence was the end of a nightmare, the end of a dream for Carter and his partner. They had been the victims of an unfortunate event, a deception from the very beginning. At that moment, Mr. Kimbrough, with a victorious demeanor, smiled and said, "Ma'am, I have a counterclaim too. They damaged my property." This claim stunned Carter and his partner. Were they now being accused of damaging property when they had already lost everything? This was proof of how reckless and audacious Mr. Kimbrough's lies were. The expression on the judge's face changed for a moment at this claim. Her eyes scanned Mr. Kimbrough from head to toe. This claim could have taken the case in a completely different direction. The question in the judge's mind was, "Well, Mr. Kimbrough, how did they damage the property?" However, the judge paused for a moment and asked a more fundamental question before asking that one. "Just a second," she said. Her voice now resembled a skeptic's. "Do you own the property?" This question stunned Mr. Kimbrough. His smile froze instantly. His face had turned completely pale. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He wasn't expecting this question. He thought this case was built solely on the lack of evidence from the young couple. But the judge was questioning Mr. Kimbrough's own identity, his own authority. "No, ma'am," said Mr. Kimbrough. "The property is not mine." When the judge heard this confession, she took a deep breath. She closed her eyes as if she wished this hearing would end. "Do you have a power of attorney from the owner of the property?" she asked. "That is, the authority to file a lawsuit on their behalf?" Mr. Kimbrough tried to smile cunningly, but this effort failed. "No," he said. His voice was nothing more than a trembling whisper. "But I was the contractor for the owner." This explanation completely exhausted the judge's patience. The judge paused for a moment, tapped her fingers on the table, and looked at Mr. Kimbrough. "Show me a document that you were the contractor for the owner," she said. Her voice was now a threat. Mr. Kimbrough started to shuffle the papers in his hand. "I also have a copy of a 30-day notice," he said. The judge could no longer tolerate his last-ditch efforts. Just tell me what I need to know, she said. Mr. Kimbrough had to lay all his cards on the table. Okay, I have a lease from the owner. I was the tenant of this house. I just sublet it to them. Carter and his partner looked at each other in shock. This was the final proof that everything Mr. Kimbrough had said from the beginning was a lie. He was not the owner of the house, just a tenant, and they had become subtenants of a subtenant. Carter's partner, for one last time, yelled, "Your Honor, this man never lived there at all." The judge this time put down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Everything had become clear. The lies, the scam, the deception, all had fallen on Mr. Kimbrough. He was not the owner of the property, he had no power of attorney, and the agreement he made with the young couple was not a legal agreement. The claims of property damage were just another lie built on a lie. The judge would not spend any more time on this case. "It's over," the judge said, her voice echoed in the courtroom like a bomb exploding. "It's over." The bailiff immediately stood up and formally closed the case by saying, "Everyone, parties are excused." Carter and his partner looked at Mr. Kimbrough one last time. The mocking smile on his face had disappeared, replaced by surprise and fear. Justice had been served with the simplest questions. Do you own the property? Do you have a power of attorney? Do you have proof? These three questions were enough to dismantle the entire web of lies Mr. Kimbrough had built. As the young couple silently left the courtroom, they had learned that justice sometimes comes not with the loudest shouts, but with the simplest questions. This was the end of all the pain, losses, and disappointments they had experienced for a year, with a moment of relief in the triumph of justice. To not miss real case stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments.